Hi there, Michael here. In today's video, I want to take a look at a new version of Ginger Audio's Ground Control Sphere, which is a virtual monitoring application for immersive studio setups. It allows you to control multiple sets of studio monitors of varying speaker layouts from your computer. Version 1 was already a favorite among many immersive audio professionals. Version 2 now offers a couple of new features, such as a redesigned user interface, the ability to combine multiple audio interfaces into one output, an upgraded bass management system, a new link plugin, and most interestingly to me personally, a much deeper integration of Apple Spatial Monitoring, including head tracking through AirPods. Now, head-tracked Apple Spatial Audio Monitoring was already possible in version 1 through a separate plugin called iRender, but Ginger Audio have now completely integrated that into their user interface. Unfortunately, this will also be the cause of my main issue with this new version of Ground Control Sphere, and that is actually a big issue. As you might have already guessed, this software is Mac only, so if you are a Windows user, you are out of luck, unfortunately. But it is a really interesting one, so let's jump right into a Reaper session and set up Ginger Audio's Ground Control Sphere. So I'm going to work with Reaper today, and what I'm going to do is I have a track here, and this track, by the way, was created with Suno, so this is actually an artificial intelligence track, and if you want to listen to the track in its full glory, head over to my second channel where I publish all kinds of AI music. It's really interesting how far this got in the last couple of months. Anyway, but this is not about AI. So what I have here is a track, and what I want to do with this track is I want to convert it, or I want to upmix that to 7.1.4, and I want to use Ginger Audio Sphere as a monitoring system in order to monitor what I'm doing. But before I do that, let's first have a brief listen to what we have here. So what I essentially did is ask Suno to do something that is a little bit electronic, but has a Middle Eastern vibe, and it actually kind of did that quite well, I think. So let's open up Ginger Audio Ground Control Sphere and complete the setup there. Now, if you are familiar with version 1 of Ginger Audio Sphere, you might notice that the interface has been significantly improved. It is very logical now. On the left side, you have the sources. There are a total of 12 sources that you have available on 2 tabs. On the right side, you have the outputs. There are once again 12 outputs in 2 tabs, and these 12 outputs actually are divided into 8 regular outputs and 4 downmix outputs, and we're going to use these downmix outputs a little bit later. In the middle, you have a section where you can see the individual speaker layout, and what you can do here is you can, for example, solo certain speakers, you can mute certain speakers, you can do that for all the front speakers or the wide speakers, the surround speakers, the rear speakers, the top speakers, the LFE, and you can do that for the sources as well as for the outputs. Down here you have the traditional monitoring system settings that you have in a professional studio. You have a talkback option, for example, and what you can also do is you can connect it to Ginger Audio's service that allows you to collaborate across the internet. This essentially allows you to stream your setup to somebody else and kind of collaborate that way. So it's actually really nicely laid out and very well thought out. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select the sources settings, and then I'm going to select the output settings. And what I want to do is I want to use a 7.1.4 signal coming from Reaper. I'm going to use Sphere in order to convert it into stereo and send that out to the Rodecaster so that you guys can hear that. So the first thing I'm going to do for that is I'm going to select the sources. And for the sources, I'm going to choose one of the virtual devices that come with Ginger Audio Sphere. Now, it doesn't really matter which one you choose. It depends on the number of channels that you need. We will need 7.1.4 12 channels, so the 16 channel device is perfectly fine. We're going to choose 7.1.4. We're going to make note of the channel layout because we might need that later. You know, kind of plugins use different channel layouts, so it's always useful to remember which channel layout we're currently working with. So that I've already selected that. Now, if I want to, I can actually go into the sources settings here, and I can move those things around. So, for example, if the channel layout doesn't really work the way I wanted it, or if the digital audio workstation that I'm working with is sending them in a way that is not expected, I can actually rearrange that here. I can also change the volume of the individual channels. And I can also use the solo and mute button here. So that's essentially the same thing as kind of doing it in the interface. There's also the option to add a plugin here, and we're going to use that in a second. But be aware that when you add a plugin here, what is going to happen is that this plugin is going to be inserted between the input and the solo mute buttons. So if you, for example, use a plugin that changes the channel layout, then the solo and mute button is no longer going to show you the correct speaker that you are going to solo or mute. And this is actually going to become an issue in a little bit. Now, before I continue with that, let me first go over to the outputs. And for the outputs, what I have here, I will currently have the MacBook speakers. I don't want those. So let me just go over to the Rodecaster and select the front, left, and right as the main output. And this will now take the first two channels of the input and send them into the output. So it's not going to automatically downmix. So that's something that you need to take care of manually, or kind of need to set up manually. It's not going to do that automatically. It will actually do that automatically in the downmix options. And once again, we're going to kind of talk about those in a second. But let me first go back to Reaper and complete the Reaper setup so that we actually get audio through Ginger Audio Sphere. And for that, what I need to do is I need to go into the settings, and in the settings, I need to kind of change that to the virtual device that Ginger Audio Sphere is expecting. That is the 16-channel output device, or virtual device here. So I'm going to press OK. And what I want to do is I want to turn that track into 7.1.4, and for that to work, the first thing I need to do is I need to change the track channels to 12. And then I also need to change the output, the master bus really, to 12 channels as well. And I need to make sure that all 12 channels are also sent to the actual output. And that should be everything there is to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm simply going to upmix. And for upmixing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a plugin from UGen, that the Halo upmix plugin, which is an upmix plugin that I really like. It actually works relatively well. And in particular, what it does really, really well, it kind of really kind of makes that three-dimensional. So it's one of those plugins that can really kind of fill the space from a stereo track. And that should be pretty much it. So if I play the audio now, I should actually hear something through the Rodecaster. So you guys should hear that. And it should go through, once again, through the upmixing plugin here, going through the output into the virtual device, the 16-channel virtual device, into Ginger Audio Sphere, and in Ginger Audio Sphere from the 12-channel input into the 2-channel output. So you're only going to hear the first two channels, but those are left and right channels. So the experience will be very, very similar to the actual track. So let's play that. And as you can see, sort of the channels are coming in here, and they are sent out to the two channels in the output. And once again, those are only left and right channels. There's no real down mixing going on here. So let me stop the audio. So what I want to do now is I want to actually kind of manually add a down mix to the main output. And, kind of, even though you can use the dedicated down mix outputs, and that will actually be a lot easier to do, I still think that sending a downmix through the main output might be useful. You might have a setup, for example, a 7.1 speaker layout in your environment, and you might want to kind of just have a particular type of downmix going through those 8 speakers. So it might be useful to have a separate main output where you're actually converting the input that you're getting into the proper output. So for example, if you have a 9.1.6 signal coming in and you want to monitor that on a 7.1 system, and you have a particular plugin that you like to use to convert that into 7.1. That's essentially what I want to do. Now, in Ginger Audio, you can add these downmix plugins on 2 ways, technically. You can add that here in the sources section, and you can add that here in the output section. Let's just add that here in the sources section. So let's do, for example, Virtuoso, just for fun, and let's change that to the 7.1.4. We're getting 7.1.4 in, and then we are going to have a binaural out. And let's just play the audio again. So let's play that. Right, and this is now taking in the 12 channels. It's converting that into stereo. And what I'm now hearing is no longer really only left and right channel. I'm actually hearing the down mix. Now, this is one way to do that. However, there's a little bit of a disadvantage here, and the disadvantage is that what I said at the beginning is that the solo and mute button are actually not after the plugin, and that means that these solo and mute buttons do no longer act in the way they are expected to act. So if I'm, for example, soloing one of the side speakers, let's do the left surround, for example, I'm not hearing anything, and the reason I'm not hearing anything because the signal that I'm muting here, or the soloing here, is actually the one that comes out of Virtuoso. So at that point, it has already been downmixed. So this is not an ideal way to do that. So that's why let me remove the plugin again. Now the next option would be to do that at the output section here. So let's just add Virtuoso here. And let's once again change that to 7.1.4. And as you can see, the problem that I'm starting to have here is that even though I've set that to 7.1.4, it's still only kind of receiving the stereo. And the reason for that is because the channel layout that is used here in the output is the channel layout that is defined by the output. So since I'm only working with a stereo output, regardless of what plugin I put in here, it's going to always only see the two channels. Now this is a bit of an issue, and quite frankly, that worked differently in version 1. I think in version 1 that was actually a little bit better. It's one of those things that was better. Now, fortunately, and let me just turn the audio off here. Fortunately, there is a workaround for that, and that workaround uses one of the new features actually. And for that, what we're going to do is we're not going to send that to the Rodecaster directly. What we're actually going to do is we're going to send that instead to a multiple devices output. So essentially, what we need to do is we need to tell the output, hey, you don't have only 2 channels, you actually have 12 channels, and that can be done with the multiple devices output. And what we're going to do is we're going to just send the first 2 channels, left and right. Those are the channels that are going to come out of Virtuoso into the Rodecaster, and the remaining we are going to leave empty, and that actually should work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch that over to multiple devices output, and so I'm going to once again use the 7.1.4 here. And once I have that in the multiple devices output, what I can do is I can actually apply a separate output, a separate device for each individual channel. So if you have multiple audio interfaces connected to your computer, for example, you can combine them here. Now, on a Mac, that was always possible. So you could always do an aggregate device and kind of do it that way. But it's really nice that they've directly integrated that here into the software. I do get a lot of questions from people who say, how do I set up a very cheap Atmos system? I want to kind of use the least amount of money possible, and all the interfaces, audio interfaces that have a lot of outputs that I need for the Atmos Studio setup are really expensive. Here you can do that with very simply, just buy 2 very, very inexpensive Behringer kind of 10-channel audio interfaces, and set them, connect them to your computer, and then essentially use Jinja Audio in order to send the audio channels to the correct audio interface, and that way everything is set up. So it makes things a lot easier. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to send the left channel here to the, where are we? Here, Rodecaster, the front left, and I'm going to send the right channel to Rodecaster front right. Now, the thing is that if I do that now that way and I play the audio, so let's just play the audio again. And let's just open up. I'm still only getting 2, and the reason I'm still only getting 2 because Jinja Audio is actually smart, or in this particular case a little bit too smart. It knows that there are no outputs connected, and that this, even though it is a multi-devices output, I only have 2 channels really active, so it's only going to use 2 channels. So in order for that to actually work, what we need to do is we need to add channels from a dummy output, really. And there are a couple of different options that you can use. You can use any virtual device, really. So you could, for example, use one of the Sphere devices. So you could, for example, use Sphere 32. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a loopback device. In case you're not aware what loopback is, that is a nice little piece of software from a company called Rogue Amoeba. Very weird name, I'm going to leave a link in the description that allows you to define or to develop or to kind of implement virtual devices. And I just kind of set this as a 16-channel virtual device. That's not going anywhere, but I just need to assign that to my output so that this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select output 3 here, and then I'm going to simply go down here and going to add those. So 5, let's go to 5. I'm honestly not completely sure in the final video if I'm going to edit that out, but I might not. We will see. 7. Then we have 8. Maybe I should tell a joke. I don't know. I don't know any jokes. 9. I'm a very non-jokey person. 10, 11, sorry. that was my German came through. 11. And then finally 12. Now, if we do that, where are we? Here we are. Loopback. 12. Now, if we do that, you notice that I have not selected anything for the LFE, and that is where the second really nice feature comes in, and that is the improved bass management. So what Ginger Audio allows you to do is not only work with one subwoofer, you can actually have up to 4 subwoofers, and you can intelligently kind of move audio in and out of those subwoofers. So instead of selecting that here in this setup, what I actually need to do is I need to enable one of those subwoofers, and I've enabled here already subwoofer number A. This is enabled here as well, and then the output needs to be put at subwoofer number 11. So I'm going to do that here, and that's going to be number 4. And with that said, everything should now actually work correctly. So let's go back into Reaper and let's play the audio again. Let's go back into and let's open up. And as you can see, the audio is now coming in. Now, the one thing, and that is, once again, you need to be aware that different plugins use channel layouts differently. Virtuoso is actually expecting the channels in a different configuration. So in order for Virtuoso to work, what you need to do is you need to go into the matrix settings here and change the configuration. Okay, but what about if I want to use the built-in downmix capabilities? And this can be done here with the outputs, with the downmix outputs. And what I want to do now is I want to actually use Ginger Audio Sphere in order to do Apple Spatial Audio monitoring with the Apple AirPods. And the nice thing is that Ginger Audio Sphere actually allows you to do that natively now. And it also includes the possibility to implement or to use head tracking. So what I'm going to do now is I first need to put on my AirPods. So for that, I'm going to take off my regular headphones and need to put on my AirPods. And then once I've taken my AirPods and they've connected to my computer, let me just turn off the transparency so that I hear myself. And what I need to do now is I need to go into the downmix settings here. And in the downmix settings, I now can select my Apple AirPods. So let me just kind of select them here, outputs 1 and 2. And once I've done that here, I have this little button here, and this button allows me to change the downmix options. So I can use the Dolby Direct downmix, so I can use the Dolby downmix options, or I can use the Apple Renderer. And in the Apple Renderer, I now have the options to use personalized spatial audio, head-tracked spatial audio, or personalized head-tracked spatial audio. Now, the one problem that I'm running into is that because the Mac also connects directly to the AirPods, and Ginger Audio actually has that now integrated natively into Sphere. These two outputs actually conflict with each other. So in order for that to work correctly, what you need to do is you need to go to the output of your Mac, and you need to actually change that to some other output really. For whatever reason, it's going to conflict. It's actually going to glitch out quite substantially if you don't do that. But once you've converted that into a different output, then everything just works fine. Now, when I play the audio now, you're not going to hear anything, but you need to believe me that this actually works, because essentially it's going to go directly into my AirPods. So let me just play the audio. Once again, you're not going to hear anything here at all. And if I switch that over to head-tracked, and this actually works really, really, really well. I really commend them for implementing that way. That is really, really, really nice. However, and this is a really, 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 really big however, if I now take my AirPods off, it should actually recognize that they are no longer connected. And so now we have it red, so that means they are no longer connected. Now, if I now take them out again and put them on, Ginger Audio is going to connect, but so is the Mac. So whenever I take my AirPods off, put them into the case, and then take them out again, put them on again, I need to go back into the main settings and change the audio interface here. And I did not find a way to get around that, unfortunately. Now, the problem is even bigger if you have the feature enabled in the AirPods that detect whether or not they are on or off your ears. So if you actually kind of have that enabled, meaning the feature that where the AirPods recognize that they are in your ears or not, that actually happens only if you take them off and take them back on again. It will actually switch back to the AirPods, and then you need to go back into the settings and change the audio interface again. So while this complete integration into Ginger Audio Sphere is really, really nice, and don't get me wrong, this is very well done. It has this one complication that whenever I put the AirPods on, the Mac wants to kind of also connect to the AirPods. And if I want to connect to the AirPods, the interface, the audio interface that the Mac is going to use is actually going to switch over to the AirPods. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure if there's a way to fix that. I'm also not quite sure if I missed something, very well possible, but it is a little bit annoying. Okay, so one final thing, and that is a new plugin that they included, and this is the Link plugin. And the Link plugin, what this does is it allows you to connect your tracks in your digital audio workstation directly with Ginger Audio Sphere. So instead of going through the regular DAW output, what it allows you to do is it allows you to directly send the audio from the digital audio workstation into Ginger Audio Sphere. Now, this plugin is something that doesn't come automatically with Ginger Audio Sphere. At least I think it doesn't. I had to pay a little bit of extra in order to get that plugin, but it is a nice plugin. So let's just check that out. So let me just switch it back to the regular output here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to back into Reaper, and what you can do here is, and let me just kind of put that here. It doesn't really make any difference because I only have 2 tracks. So let's just search for the Link plugin. This is the ground control Link Sphere, and we're going to add that here. And what it does is it sends the audio from this track directly into Sphere. Currently it shows that it's not connected. I first need to tell the system which source I want this actually sent this to, and let's just send it, I don't know, source D, sorry. So let's just go into Ginger Audio Sphere, and let's go into source D. And if I now go into source D in the settings, I see that I have this Link plugin here, and I connect to that, and that will directly link whatever is going through the track with Ginger Audio Sphere. So if I play the audio now, it's going to be sent to Ginger Audio Sphere twice, first through the regular output and then through the Link plugin. And that can be really useful. That can be really useful if you have multiple tracks, for example, that you want to monitor separately. You can send them into Ginger Audio directly and kind of do your monitoring that way. I think it's. I mean, you could do that in other ways as well. So you don't really need the Link plugin on other people to do that. But I think it's a nice feature. So that's really it. I think it's a really nice piece of software, very well done update, with the one exception that might not be possible to fix. I'm honestly not completely sure, but the fact that the Mac is constantly connecting to my AirPods is a little bit annoying. So what are my final thoughts? Well, I think that this new version is a significant upgrade over the old one. The user interface in particular is much more streamlined and makes much more sense. The new bass management and audio interface fusion features are excellent. I'm not so sure about the usefulness of the new Link plugin, but it is certainly an interesting addition. My only complaint is with the implementation of the head tracking functionality. I like the idea of the deep integration into Ground Control Sphere, but that creates an annoying workflow disturbance. Whenever you connect your AirPods to the computer, your main audio output will switch to the AirPods, and that will cause Ground Control Sphere to no longer function correctly. So you need to manually switch the main output of your computer back to where it was before you connected the AirPods. Otherwise your setup will glitch out. I did not find a way completely around this problem. You can make it bearable by disabling some settings in how the AirPods connect to your Mac, but that is only a partial fix. But maybe I was just dumb and there is a way to solve this issue completely. If that's the case, please let me know in the comment section below. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next video.